just about. We're going live on YouTube. In 20 seconds. Okay. You are good to go.
All right. Thank you, Director. Good evening, everyone. It is 6:06 p.m. I will call the February 11th, 2021 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for the City of Espanola to order. I will ask staff to call the roll.
Commissioner Earl Wright. Commissioner Earl Wright.
Present.
Commissioner Don Casados.
Present.
Commissioner Anissa Martinez. Commissioner Earl Wright. Present. There we go.
Commissioner Martinez.
I see Commissioner Martinez. Saw Commissioner Martinez.
Can you tell us you are present, Commissioner? We can't hear you. Okay, she might be having some audio trouble.
Okay, we'll
She's
come
def-
back. We do see her present.
She's definitely present.
Commissioner Dinah Quintana. Not present. Commissioner Sadia Ahmed. Not present. Vice Chair Clyde V. Hill.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, sir.
Right on. I'm present.
And Chair Eric Martinez.
Present.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Director. At this time, we can go ahead and recognize the folks that are present in the audience today.
Yeah, that would be great. Oh, while they're signing in, I'll identify those folks that are present on the call. We've got with us representing the applicant, Joe Slagle, Deb Salazar, David Whitehour, and Mike Walla. And from the neighborhood, we've got Alicia Hicks, Liz Martinez, looks like Steve Lujan, Michelle Avallo, and I believe that's it. And present in the chambers, we've got Avron Bustos and Anita Madrid.
All right, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Director. Let's move on to item 2, Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
States of America.
Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, folks. We're on item 3 of the agenda, approval of the agenda. I will ask staff if there's any changes.
Mr. Chair, we would request that when we get to the commercial site plan, that we hear the applicant presentation first. They've got an individual that's only able to be with us for a short time. Otherwise, we have no other suggested changes.
Okay, that's a procedural change, so we'll go ahead and accommodate that. Are there any changes to the agenda by the commission? All right, seeing or hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda, Mr. Chair.
Earl Wright will second.
Thank you, commissioners. We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Commissioner Earl Wright,
In favor of the motion.
Commissioner Don Casados,
In favor.
Commissioner Nisa Martinez. We got a thumbs up.
You're still silent.
You're still silent. She's working on it. Commissioner or Vice Chair Clyde V. Hill,
In favor of the motion.
Chair Eric Martinez,
In favor.
and we'll try again with Commissioner Nisa Martinez.
In favor.
There we go. Now we heard you. All right, motion passes.
All right. Thank you, Director. Let me make sure I'm following the right procedure here. All right, item number 4, public concerns and business from visitors. This is a part of the agenda for anyone that would like to speak on any other items that are not on the agenda. So is there Mr. Bustos? If you could say your name, your address, and
My name's Abraham Bustos. I live here in the valley. My address is 1820 Calle Culebra. That's off Filiano Road, next to the Rio de Vista Apartments or house development. And I'm here to request a hearing or speak to the whole entire yeah, I'm a little tongue-tied, excuse me, I'm kind of nervous. With all the commission and all the zoning officials here. Me and Richard have been working on problem that I've been having at my home where the subdivision is being, pushing dirt into my property and doing property damage to my house. They're not paying attention to the drainage and irrigation laws and regulations. And I'd like to see if we could present it to you guys, and perhaps the commissioner will take action and solve this problem for. Let my daughter explain. I'm a little nervous myself.
no problem.
My daughter,
Thank you. Same, please give us your name and your address, please.
Hi, my name is Anita Madrid. My address is 1433 East 2nd Street. I live in Pueblo, Colorado. My dad is Abraham Bustos. Today, we want some action taken because we've seen some damage to my dad's property as a result of this subdivision being built next to us. There's dirt and boulders going over his property. There's code violations. We don't have all the proper permits. They don't have all the proper permits to continue this zoning in this area, and the drainage. We have an issue with the drainage. We're very concerned that when it rains or snows, all the drainage, all the water and stuff is gonna go into my dad's property, and I'd hate to see damage happen to the property before some action is taken. We need action now. We need the city manager, code enforcement to get on that and get the drainage taken care of before the issue is beyond repair for my dad's house. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Madrid, and thank you, Mr. Bustos. So it's not an action item on the agenda, but we do appreciate you coming in and letting us know about your concerns. I do know, recall that you were here last meeting, correct? So we'll ask staff to look at your situation and see if there's any action that would be for commission review. And if there is, that would be the way to get on the agenda. And I know, I think last time I recommended, yeah, you keep working with staff on that, so. Okay. Director?
Mr. Chair, I was just going to say, I will connect with City Manager Martinez about this issue and see what he feels is the best way to proceed forward. I also know that Mr. Bustos and Ms. Madrid will be reviewing some documents here at the city tomorrow related to that subdivision. So we'll continue to work with them through that discovery process.
Okay, thank you, Director. We appreciate you working with Mr. Bustos and his daughter to look for a solution to the issue. And if there's anything that needs commission review, please bring that before us. And if you could give us an update at the next meeting, that'd be great.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Are there any others that, any members of the public that would like to speak to anything that's not on the agenda today? Any folks online, if you want to speak up or use the raise your hand function. Commissioner Wright, you want to speak?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I would just encourage if Mr. Bustos and Ms. Madrid, you do have the ability to seek injunctive relief through the courts. And that is certainly an option before you if the city of Espanola isn't able to find a reason if there are a lack of permits or something, they should be able to red flag the development or red tag it, I'm sorry. But also for immediate relief, you could seek an injunction in the courts against what's happening against your property, because it sounds like you actually have property damage occurring to your property. And unfortunately, that's a civil matter, but that may be your best route to pursue. I just wanted to let you know that if you weren't aware of that option. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. And good point. I was thinking the same thing. I just didn't want to offer legal advice to folks, but that's certainly always an option. Any other comments or any members of the public wish to speak on any items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing or hearing none. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item, item number 5. This is an item tabled from our prior meeting. It is a public hearing. So the following case is quasi-judicial in nature, and the hearing will be conducted under the provisions required by the New Mexico Court of Appeals. This includes the identification of parties and the swearing in of all those who wish to provide testimony. The opportunity of cross-examination to ask questions will be provided to all parties. So it is 6:18. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing for case number 2021-01, commercial site plan. Joe Slagle, on behalf of the Norte Credit Union applicant, requests approval of the site plan for development of a credit union branch with drive-through lanes on property currently addressed as 1720 North Riverside Drive, UPC 1-047-122-226-061. The subject property is located in the B2 General Commercial District, and it was tabled at the January 14th, 2021 meeting. All right, so commissioners, is there anyone who has a conflict of interest or that has had ex parte communications related to this case?
None.
Seeing or hearing none.
No,
No,
sir.
Mr. Chair.
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, commissioners.
Oh, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Casals, thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and identify the parties and we can swear folks in. We have Joe Slagle here on behalf of Del Norte Credit Union, Deb Salazar, David Whitehour, and we have staff. And if there's any folks that want to speak on this case, we'll also need to swear you in as well. So we'll need you to raise your right hand, show yourself on the screen. Raise your right hand. Staff. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give will be the truth?
I do.
I do.
I do. I do.
Hold on one second. Steve Lujan, I do.
Mr. Lujan, Mr. Walla,
Mike Walla, I do.
Sorry, had to swear in if I'm in. I don't think so, babe. So yeah, no, I can after work tomorrow.
you wish to speak? Yes, you'll need to swear in, so thank you.
Ms. Hicks and Ms. Martinez.
Sorry.
I do.
And Ms.
I
Martinez.
do.
Ms. Hicks and Ms. Martinez?
Yeah, I do. Can you hear us?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
I do as well. This is Michelle Vio.
Thank you, Ms. Bio. I think we captured everybody, right, Director?
Testing,
Yep.
All right, we're gonna go in a little bit
Testing.
different order because I know some of the staff with the applicant needs to leave. So we'll go ahead and have the applicant do their presentation first. So Mr. Slagle, is that you gonna start?
Actually, I think what we'd like to do with the permission of the commission is to discuss the drainage and grading. Mike Walla is on the phone, our civil engineer, and he's the one that can speak to that most effectively. So if we could get to that first, that would be our preference.
Yeah, however you want to run your presentation, we're fine.
Okay, well, I think the previous comments and concerns regarding the grading and drainage have been addressed, and although the site plan has changed due to, I think it was fire truck access and whatnot, basically the scheme is the same, and we've gotten review and approval by the Espanoola's agent, I guess you'd call Souter Miller, on the original submittal, and as I expressed to the planning director today in an email response to his questions, our scheme is basically the same, and really the site has not changed that much. We're going to be ponding all of the differential flow from the pre-development condition to the proposed development condition on site. And so that there will be no detrimental or increase in off-site flow from the site to the downstream facilities in the neighborhood. And so that was our key issue and a high priority for us in designing this site. And that's based on a 100-year, 10-day storm, which is the most extreme criteria or requirement for a drainage system. So I think that the fact that we are adding a lot of impervious surface area is going to be addressed by the fact that we'll be able to pond all of the differential flow that potentially could run off site on our site.
Okay.
Beyond that, I don't know what other concerns there might be, and I'm sure happy to answer any questions that any of the commissioners might have.
Thank you, Mr. Walla. I understand you do have to leave, so we'll change our pattern here a little bit and go ahead and ask the commission if they have any questions for you. I do have some, but I'll start with commissioners. Commissioner Wright, do you have any questions about drainage for Mr. Walla?
Mr. Chairman, I do, but I would defer to your questions, who's more of a subject matter expert on this. And if I have any time, I'll ask mine.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. I'll go ahead and start it off, and then that might spur some follow-up. So, Mr. Walla, so in looking at the drainage plan, the grading and drainage plan, you're showing a roughly, I think, a 12,000 cubic foot capacity in on-site ponds currently. And the runoff calculations are somewhere in the range of 21,000 cubic feet. I do understand there's a historical drainage component that flows off the site. But given the amount of impervious surface that the development will be placing on site, can you explain that a little bit and provide any assurances that you do have enough capacity for that 100-year storm?
Okay, well, you've had a chance to see the calculations on the grading and drainage plan itself, and as it describes, the pre-development condition had a runoff flow with no ponding on site to the downstream facilities of basically the difference between what we're ponding now and what the overall 100-year, 10-day storm could develop. And so, obviously that is the priority in any development of a grading and drainage plan for a new proposed development, that is. And so, what we're proposing is a ponding capacity that basically handles all the additional potential runoff that we would develop with this new project.
Okay. So given that the prior or the site as it stands today has a majority of it is impervious, you can actually see on some Google area maps where it was kind of ponding within the center of the lot on the right where it hasn't been developed yet. And possibly a lot of the runoff that was impervious with the prior building and the parking lot, given the vegetated growth on the lot on the south, looked like it was likely flowing that direction. Will this system be able to drain sufficiently so that you don't have any essentially spillage onto or impacts onto adjacent lots, or create a pond outside of the pond within the credit union's parking lot?
Well, the part of our ponding capacity is in the parking lot, but it will not affect any adjacent properties. We've got a wall on the south and west sides of the property that will prevent any kind of overflow to affect those adjacent properties.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walla. So my next question centers around the geotechnical report and the existing soils that are out there, which looks to be a rather deep layer of fat clay that tends to hold water and not percolate or infiltrate. You have concerns with that in order to maintain capacity of that pond? And if so, what measures can be placed so that that pond can in fact drain and not stay full and depend on evaporation to lower its water levels?
Yeah, I agree that soil is, once it gets saturated, it won't allow for much percolation. And so what I would propose is that, and we discussed that earlier today with the contractor, is a controlled release catch basin with a relatively small diameter pipe that would allow for a long-term outflow of the water that might be collected in that pond to Camino Miramontes. We can run that through the curb, that outlet pipe, or we can do a sidewalk culvert. But we can restrict the orifice that would be created in that catch basin so that the release of that ponded water would not affect the peak storm rate in the neighborhood.
Is it, and I'm not sure if the design team evaluated this concept, but looking at some storage for utilizing that water for irrigation of the surrounding landscaping?
No, we did not.
I'm sorry?
We didn't explore that option.
Okay.
Might step in. This is Joe Slagle. I might step in and add to that. You know, rain is not as consistent here in New Mexico as it might be in some other locations. So that would be a very periodic and sporadic thing to depend on. And the cost of maintaining that water, storing it, pumping it, is not really
Mr. Wright, Commissioner Wright, could you mute your mic, please?
Sorry about that.
Go ahead, Mr. Slagle.
Have to repeat the whole thing. Anyway, what I was saying, it was that water retention and use for landscape is really not within the budget and the constraints that we have on this project.
All right, thank you. That's all for my questions. I'll have some follow-up questions for staff on the same subject. Commissioner Wright, I'll go ahead and go back to you if that spurred any my questions. Spurred any questions on your end about drainage?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, my apologies for making all the noise. I am a little concerned. I mean, we're starting, New Mexico is a dry climate, but what we're starting to see is, as we experienced in just a few miles south of here, a 500-year storm that did tremendous damage. My concern is outlet onto Calle Miramontes, which already has experienced flooding problems and is costing the city a lot of money in terms of maintenance of that road, and potential threats to those residents from flooding. So I'm a little concerned, and I realize City of Espanola does not require rainwater catchment and reuse like some of our neighbors do. And it's something that this project would have been subject to if it were in a different jurisdiction. So it's not really a question, but I am, again, because of the clay soils, I guess my real question, Mr. Chair, is we now proposing a block wall on the west side. Is that correct?
I believe that's the case, but I'll ask the applicant if he can confirm.
Yes. In the response to the concerns that we had from the last meeting, the Del Norte Credit Union has stepped up to the plate, and they have agreed to provide the masonry wall on the west property line as well as the south property line, and they're going to bear the expense of that, the additional expense of that.
How tall is that wall?
6 feet.
So this will be a 6 foot, I'm assuming CMU wall, concrete masonry unit wall, perched on the edge of this retaining basin that could potentially hold water for as long as a week due to the clay conditions. Has that wall actually been engineered? I know the city would require it if it were an 8 foot have you guys considered that and the implications of the potential for that wall collapsing due to the nature of the soils beneath it?
If I can step in, I'll speak to that. Yeah, we designed it. We structured structural as well as civil engineers on the project, and we designed that wall. The footing is adequate for any kind of condition, including a saturated soil condition.
Okay. And that, I'm assuming that's a good footing, so it should prevent any leaching to the properties to the west onto their properties?
The footing would have less to do with that than the surface of the wall. And we could certainly moisture protect the surface of the wall below grade.
Was that something you were planning to do, or is that something the commission should consider as a condition of approval?
Yeah, I don't think we indicate that on the design drawings, but we can add that to that as well, to the detail.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Walla, Mr. Slagle. That concludes my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Vihil, do you have any questions about drainage to Mr. Walla?
No, I do not. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Martinez?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Casalos?
I don't have any questions at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. At this time, if that concludes the commission's questions, we'll move on to questions from staff regarding to Mr. Waller regarding drainage. Do you have any questions, Director?
I do have just one clarification question. Mr. Waller, it looks like looking at the drainage diagram that the depth of the deepest part of the retention basin is about 5 feet roughly below the adjacent sidewalk. And I guess the vast majority of it looks like it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 2 feet. I'm understanding your comments to say that, you'd already considered reshaping that to perhaps allow some flow out to the street. The city is not in favor of that, but I feel like this is something that we could potentially work through with the city's engineer. I've got a statement from them I can read later during my presentation to work out any kind of minor details on the reshaping of the depth of that basin. So my question to you, I guess, Mr. Wall, would be, given the deepest part is about 5 feet and most of it's less than that, my understanding would be that we've got some potential capacity to make the rest of that as it runs along that west wall perhaps a little deeper. Is that correct?
No, what I would, if we were to include a catch basin and controlled release outlet, there would still be some amount of water at the lowest part of the pond regardless, because you're right, we don't have flow, gravity flow out to the street.
Okay, so then that would be for those listening would be sort of similar to kind of like a pipe sticking up at some point in the basin. So then the water gets that high, then it flows through that pipe to go elsewhere. Is that basically what you're describing?
That's right. And it would. There's only one place it could go, and that's Camino Miramonte. We wouldn't want to dump it on any of the adjacent properties.
Okay, and that's something that because of it would be designed and engineered, we could pretty much control the amount of flow that would be subject to that overflow, correct?
That's right. Yeah, we'd make sure that we didn't, like I said, we don't want to dump water into the street at the peak rate of the runoff from a peak storm, and so it would be controlled release so that. It would probably take, depending on the amount of volume of water in the pond, it would take anywhere from 8 to 24 hours to completely drain.
Okay, thank you. No more questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director. Richard's question prompted another follow-up question for me, Mr. Walla. Would a French type drain design over excavating below the pond, utilizing rock and filter fabric, would that also maybe be a possible solution to help the pond drain?
It would in conditions where we had a thinner layer of clay, but like you said, the geotechnical report indicates a 21-foot deep layer of clay. So that would have to be a 22-foot deep French drain, which is impractical for maintenance and also for construction cost. And where it would have to be located is right next to an adjacent property.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walla. At this time, I'll ask any neighboring property owners if they have any questions for Mr. Walla regarding the drainage. So this is specific to drainage. So I'll go around the Zoom room here. Ms. Hicks, we'll go ahead and start with you. Do you have any questions for Mr. Walla?
Definitely, I have some questions more so. So you're saying that it would be a slow release because there's already issues right now that the city needs to address with the release of water right now and all of at the end of the street where Mrs. Martinez lives, and there's road construction that already needs to be done. So my question is all of the drainage going to hit Camino Miramontes, or are you going to hit some onto Riverside?
The grades in Riverside, the elevation of Riverside is much higher than our site. So it's at least from a gravity flow standpoint, there's no way to get water into Riverside. So Camino Miramontes is the only option we have. And I've seen that downstream facility, at the end of the kind of the cul-de-sac at the bottom of Camino Miramontes, that storm drain pipe that's through the curb there is half full of dirt. Yeah, it does need some maintenance.
The reservation, yeah.
Is that right? So yeah, I understand that the downstream facilities are very limited, and that's why a controlled release would be the only way that we want to increase runoff from our site to the street.
Okay, well,
So this is Liz. I understand, the timed release, but even with a timed release, the condition of the street right now and releasing water allows for it to pool in certain areas, especially in front of a lot of homes. And it just can stay there for a number of days.
yeah, it's actually an ongoing issue in this neighborhood.
And the reason that culvert at the end of the street, at the last cul-de-sac, is half full of dirt is because of the condition of the road. And when we do get severe rainstorms, which in my opinion, we do get some severe, it just washes that dirt into that culvert. But in heavy rainstorms, I've had a pond in front of my house at that last cul-de-sac. So
Ms. Martinez and
even
Ms.
with
Hicks, so
drainage,
there'll be an opportunity for you to go ahead and present information to the commission. But if you have any specific questions, and staff will also speak more to this in their presentation as well. But if you have any specific questions to Mr. Walla,
okay,
let's try to limit that to questions at this time.
right, okay.
But again, you will have a chance to speak and provide testimony on what you're seeing out there. So just hold tight on that.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we got Steve Lujan online. Do you have any questions, Mr. Lujan, for Mr. Walla?
Yes, sir. I do have one. Is it possible, instead of diverting the water all the way down the street, is it possible to connect in some way the parking lot, the drainage from the parking lot directly to the sewer, since there are manhole covers in different parts of the street, in order to prevent the water flow. Because as Liz mentioned earlier, our street is in very bad shape and needs repair badly. And any extra water flow going down the street is going to create very hazardous conditions for the residents of the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Lujan. I think that would be a question for the city to respond to. So we can have Mr. Director Hubler respond to that when it's his turn.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions?
No, sir, I do not.
Thank you, Mr. Lujan. We'll go to Ms. Michelle Velo. Do you have any questions for Mr. Walla?
Yeah, it may have been mentioned before, but I may have missed it. So these ponds or these collection tanks or whatever they're being referred to as, and that are being built on the west side, closest to the farthest east cul-de-sac, I guess you could say, was actually homes that kind of bore that area where the credit union is. That property line right there, these ponds are to be built.
The ponds are on the west side of the proposed side of the credit union, correct?
Okay. And so drained into Miramontes, it to reach all the end of the street where it would go off and that's correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't get all of that. There's a little bit of feedback going on.
So all of the collecting these ponds is going to be going down communities to back where there is the gutter, if you will. That's what I refer to it as, where all of the water released into.
Right. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Director Hubler
How
has placed the plan on the screen if you need to refer to that.
being built, holding ponds are big are those?
I'm sorry?
How big are the ponds that are being the retaining
Okay.
The rain, if you will? How big are those?
If you have access to the screen, Director Hubler has posted that up there, so you can see there's a dashed line that indicates the extent of the 100-year storm value. But the majority of the ponds are right next to the west border of the property.
Okay, where the arrow is going around?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Val. Do you have any other questions for Mr. Walla?
No, not for Mr. Walsh. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any others? I thought I saw someone else coming on. And then I see our city manager, Javier Martinez, on the line too. I'm sorry for not recognizing you, City Manager Martinez, but thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez. Pleasure to be here.
All right, if there's any follow-up questions from the commission? All right. Thank you, Mr. Walla. We'll go ahead and let Mr. Slade will go ahead and continue his presentation, and then we can do the same thing and have any follow-up questions and cross-examination.
Okay, are we done with Mr. Walla?
Looks like we are. Thank you, Mr. Walla.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Okay, I would, a couple things. Before I get started, I noticed that John Wilger, our general contractor, I think has joined the call. John, are you on there?
Looks like he's still connecting.
Yep, I am.
So everybody, this is John Wilger with Wilger Enterprises. He's the one that's going to be building this project. So what I would like to do, Richard, if you would, could you screen share the site plan, please? And then I can kind of just go through the things that we've adjusted since the last meeting.
Mr. Slagle, do you expect Mr. Is it Wilger?
Wilger, yes.
To provide any testimony?
I don't know if he would. Is there anything that can you think of that any of the commissioners, any questions you'd have for the contractor? I don't think so.
If we do, or if we have questions for him, we'll swear him in prior.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Richard. If you would, please, yeah, zoom in a little bit. Okay, very good. So just quickly, the concerns last time, I'd like to just kind of start at the top and make my way down to the bottom and kind of describe what we've done. The first one, we had a concern last time of the driveway location on the north side was lining with one of the property owners on the other side of Miramonte. And we have adjusted the entire site to move that driveway to the east to adequately displace it from being directly across from their driveway. So that should, hopefully this will alleviate that concern. The other concern from the other property owner on the west, I think we've already gone through, they wanted more buffering on the west side. We've added the concrete block wall 6 feet high, and we've also increased the distance from the parking to the property line is now over 10 feet. And that's a landscape buffer and ponding area with a concrete block buffer wall to the west. So hopefully I think those were the two neighbors that had commented last week. And I think we've addressed those comments. Moving further to the south, there was some concern about the backup at the drive-through lane. We've widened the drive-through. Oh, thanks, Richard. We've widened the drive-through access aisle to 20 feet. I think that was one of the commissioner's suggestions, allowing 2 lanes of traffic through the access drive to the drive-through lanes, and has increased our drive-through capacity and backup capacity significantly. Let's see, some of the other concerns, I think were lighting, and I don't know if we have that. I wanted to make sure that we had adequate lighting on the property and also had cutoff ability for those light fixtures on our poles so that they don't spill off onto neighboring properties. And we have a photometric that was done that actually addresses that problem. Well done, Richard. There you go. So you can see, there's our photometric. That's the lighting levels that would occur on the property. And you can see on the west side and on the south side, it is cut off. There's some that bleeds a little bit onto the street and a little bit onto Riverside, but the lighting is contained within our property. I think that from what I remember, other than the grading concerns, addresses the problems. There was one comment on the landscape plan about buffering on the west side and also adding a tree at the bus station. And we have done that. And there you go. You're doing pretty good on that computer there, Richard. Well done. So we've added a shade tree at the bus stop. I think one of the commissioners had that concern. So I believe that addresses the concerns that I'm aware of. And if there are others that I missed, please bring those up. But with that, I'll just open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Slagle. Appreciate that. I do see here on my list is that the mailbox relocation was another
yes.
issue, and maybe Director Hubler might be speaking to that too, so. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll be speaking to the mailboxes.
Let's see here. All right, thank you, Mr. Slagle. I'll go ahead and ask the commission if they have any questions for you. We'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question on the signage plan, but I think Director Hubler may be able to answer that question with his presentation, so I will wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Casalos, do you have any questions?
Mr. Chair, not at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner Casalos. Commissioner Vigil.
Mr. Chair, no questions, no concerns. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wright.
Yes, Mr. Chair. And I'm looking, I guess it's on the landscape plan that actually shows the vehicle stacking. For the record, could you say what size vehicles those were used to illustrate that?
Yeah, those are 18 feet long.
Okay. And yeah, the stacking is improved, but I am concerned with the nature of vehicles in our community. We tend to have very large trucks that can run as far as, with bumpers and brush guards and whatnot, almost 24 feet. But I think we've done it. So that circulation plan isn't intended to keep the southern lane free for flow-through access. So you're showing stacking in both lanes?
Oh, I see what you're saying. In the aisle that the double lane aisle approaching the drive-throughs, yes, the south lane. It could either be, of course, what you're looking at is an extreme. I don't know if we'd ever get to this point, but obviously the south lane could be used if you turn to the right and went on out. It could be a bypass lane, so it could be used as either. Obviously, we can't pull that back any further. I don't know if you can see down there, but just to the left of the southernmost, yeah, right there where he's got his cursors, that's an existing transformer. And that is limiting the widening of our lane right there. So that's something we had to work around.
Understood. Yeah, I realize there's site constraints there. But so the intention is to allow stacking in both of those lanes.
If it's required, that's correct. In a very, very, very busy situation.
And I don't know, I guess it'll be a question for staff coming up. But I would almost like to see that actually painted as pass through only, or indicated that way. Because again, as your plan shows, that's only providing access to what I assume is an ATM station. Is the fifth station out?
The southernmost drive-through is an ATM, that's correct.
Okay. So again, not like a fast food restaurant, that'll actually be a pretty quick transaction for the most part, either deposit or withdrawal of cash. So that should be pretty quick flow.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to see that much backup behind an ATM.
I've actually seen them during these COVID days because the banks have been closed. And it's a problem that we've seen manifest in other developments in the city, and even at the branch on the west side of town, where the backup actually flows into the parking lot, and people are unable to leave their parking spot because of the vehicle stacking that's occurring at some of these drive-through locations. But this is good. There's 4 windows and an ATM, so I definitely appreciate working on improving this a bit from the last plan. So thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
And also appreciate the consideration for putting the shade tree adjacent to the bus stop there. I think that will be very helpful for the community. I am a little concerned about the retention area still, and the ponding and the landscaping there. Did any of the plant materials change on that west side from this plan to the other? And I'm sorry, I'm rattling my papers again.
Richard, can you pan to the left a little bit? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, there's been some plant material added on that west side. And that would be to help buffer that ponding area. And I think you can see that there's more room over there now. And so there's been some more plant material added in there.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a little confused. The gray is a stone pavers, I suppose?
Yes, that's gravel and
gravel over riprap. Okay, gotcha.
Right.
And so the actual plant material, I'm still having trouble identifying it.
Yeah, I don't have it at that end.
I think it's the curl leaf mahoganies, but mountain mahoganies?
I believe that's correct.
And again, those are those suitable for saturation in the retention pond?
Well, we've asked our landscape architect that designed this that we've informed him that that's a pond, and I'm not a landscape architect, so I've got to rely on his expertise. He indicated that he would provide plant material that would be appropriate for that location.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, sorry, that was a little tough question, but I'm not sure myself. It's indicated as low water usage, but it could end up being saturated. But I guess that concludes my questions, Mr. Chair, for the applicant.
They ran through all the commissioners, am I correct? So just me, I'm the only one left. So I don't have any questions, Mr. Slagle, but I do still share some concerns about the stormwater, given the underground geotechnical conditions. But I'll reserve more questions for staff on the potential solutions there. So if there's no further questions from staff or from the commission, I'll go ahead and move on to questions from staff for the applicant.
I have no questions for Mr. Slagle.
Thank you, Director. All right, we'll go ahead and jump to the neighboring property owners. If you have any questions for Mr. Slagle or his team, we'll go ahead and start with you again, Ms. Hicks and Ms. Martinez.
Can I look at the north side where the exit is? I couldn't quite see the fire hydrant. I just want to see where that aligns.
Director Huber is working on that right now. Back up on you. Give us a second here.
I did have another question too. Okay, so there's the main entry. Yeah, it's still pretty close to across where my house is. I don't know if you see that where my driveway is. I mean,
Yeah, if I could, this doesn't show the site plan, but if I might break in, I think we were using the fire hydrant as a point of reference.
yes,
And you have a fire hydrant pretty much aligning with the east side of your driveway.
yes.
That fire hydrant now aligns with the west side of our driveway. So this is a little bit,
Okay, that's off just a bit then.
yeah, this is a little bit off.
Okay. It looks better. Obviously though, if you're looking at probably, I don't know, on average, 30 vehicles coming in and out in the 10-hour span, per day of like an average work day, right? That's 300 extra vehicles per day that are going to be going in and out of there. And you said that there was no way you could get the exit onto Riverside.
That's correct. Our first site plan showed a driveway onto Riverside, and I share that concern, but we're unequivocally denied that by the Department of Transportation, the New Mexico Department of Transportation. So that's out of our control.
So that's still, okay, so that is actually further west than that. Actually, the other image that you showed is pretty accurate then. There's no way to move that over just a tad, because if you look, that lines up pretty much right with my driveway. People are going to be, you know, if I get a package delivered to my front door, and, you know, not saying that the people that, you know, bank there, because I bank there, are going to do bad, but people might want to take that package. You know what I mean? Seeing something there at my front door. So is there any way to obscure that view just a bit of my front driveway? Without me having to be inconvenienced in building a fence and all kinds of stuff out of my pocket, having that expense?
We got the landscape plan showing the trees and the landscaping scheme on the screen right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to address that, Mr. Slagle, and how that might provide some additional buffering.
You know, the only thing I can say is that we have, based on that concern, we pretty much redesigned the entire site, moved the building, moved the parking, moved the driveway, completely redesigned the grading plan to accommodate that request. And as you can see, as the further east we push that driveway, we lose parking spaces pretty much when we move that driveway to the east, and we're down to pretty much the minimum number of parking spaces that Del Norte feels comfortable having without having people parking out on the street. So I think that we've made a genuine effort to accommodate that requirement, and I'm not sure what else we can do from this point forward.
This is Dave Whitehour with Del Norte. Can I just make a comment about the redesign?
Absolutely.
No, I appreciate the redesign. I'm just saying, is there any way to obscure more of like what people can see? I mean, I do see that you guys put trees and landscaping and stuff, but I still feel like people have a real easy line of sight to my front, not only my front door, but my front window from there. Because if you actually look at an aerial view, you can see I have my front window like right, I will be able to see right into what cars are coming in and out of Del Norte based off of where my front window is by my kitchen.
And I appreciate your concerns. I just want to give a little context here. Del Norte is a not-for-profit organization. So the funds that we're using to build this branch come from our members, and we have a fiduciary responsibility to be responsible with them. The adjustments that we made to this plan are adding an additional $220,000 to the price tag of this branch. And we've gone through this process now. This will be the third iteration of kind of going through this. And we've tried really hard to accommodate everybody's concerns, but we're at a point right now where if we have to continue making revisions and stuff, it's not going to be feasible for us to move forward with the project. And that would be really unfortunate, because our members that live in Espanola have been asking for another branch because the other one we've outgrown. So I just want everybody to understand, we're not a bank. We can't sell stock to get additional capital to make all these changes. We're at the very, very high end of our budget right now. And I'm just afraid if we keep adjusting, it won't be feasible for us to do this anymore. Just a little context.
I'm not asking for an adjustment of the stuff. I'm asking for additional landscaping on that corner to block the bit of people seeing into my front yard. So when they leave, they can't see that I have a package. You get what I mean?
Are you asked? No, I don't understand that.
So I'm concerned about the people's view, because you actually can't see based off of this drawing where my front yard, like the driveway and stuff is, and where the door is. But this is like a clear line of sight to my front door, which means that any package that's delivered, people will be able to see it very easily. And if I'm not home, which, right now during COVID, I'm home, but if I'm not home, or the postman doesn't, like whomever drops off package, FedEx, UPS, doesn't ring my doorbell, I'm not going to be able to see there's a package out there, and somebody can just go and drive over there and snag it, or walk across and snag it. So that's my concern. Is there any way to like maybe put some more foliage or whatever instead of one big tree? That's going to be trimmed up on the bottom. Bushes, that's what I'm asking for. I'm not asking for you to move that entire thing more. And especially considering, like I said, throughout a one average day, you'll probably have 300 vehicles going in and out of the Del Norte. And like I say as well, I'm a member, my whole family are members. I'm excited that we're going to have an additional branch, but that is obviously a serious concern.
I guess if I could, just to summarize the question of Ms. Hicks, just that she's asking for some additional, if it's possible to add some additional landscaping for screening along that northern border on the left side of the driveway.
We can look at it. I don't know how we would do that without obscuring people's line of sight for coming in and out of that ingress egress. I don't want to make it so that their line of sight is obscured for traffic.
Well, their line of sight would I mean, if you put like a bush there or something, but I get what you're saying. But if they're exiting, they're going to be on the far right side. I'm talking about if you're looking at it, if you're exiting, right? If you're looking at the north side, the north west side of it, of that entrance and exit, having something there to obscure from them seeing my yard. You know, there's actually 3 properties right there across that whole north side that, I mean, needs to be something kind of buffering. If it's plants, it's bushes, whatever. This looks like 2 big trees and that's it.
No, there's shrubs underneath those trees. We've got shrubs. Maybe you'll not be able to see them, but there's
Well,
two.
I can see the shrubs, but in between that, I don't see anything. And then I don't see anything close to the entrance here. So like, I mean, that's like clear view of my house is what I'm saying.
You're maybe speaking more of like a hedge to.
Yeah. Something to obscure people from seeing my house and seeing like if I'm home or not, you know?
Something like a hedge that's continuous is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if that's something that can be, I guess, considered, it doesn't sound like I'm hearing any kind of commitment or answer from the applicant. So for the sake of time, we'd like to kind of move on to additional questions, unless Mr. Slago or Mr. Whitehour, you'd like to conclude anything on that point?
I mean, we can take a look at it. I just don't. I just don't want to obscure the ingress egress line of sight.
Okay. Ms. Hicks or Ms. Martinez, do you have additional questions that you might want to ask the applicant?
I have a question. The space that's allocated for ingress egress, does that allow for only 1 car entering and 1 car exiting?
Yes.
So people exiting and making a right, will there be a stop sign there?
No, there's no stop sign planned right there.
So it's a free-for-all kind of thing.
That's your condition. I believe the city has a condition for a stop sign to be installed.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily require one, but it has been done just to help.
So my other question is, what is the distance between the exit lane and the stop sign at the corner of Miramontes and Riverside Drive?
152 feet.
Excuse me?
160 feet.
Which is,
152 feet.
Oh, 52.
which
It's right
is
there.
the equivalent to how many cars?
You allow for about 20 feet per car. So that's what, 75 cars? No,
No.
7 cars. I'm sorry. 8 cars, 7, 8 cars.
How many?
6, 7 cars.
You said 20 feet per car?
Yeah, like, I think that's
That's
8
like,
cars.
that's like 7 or 8, depending on if it's a truck or vehicle or, yeah. Truck or car.
Yeah.
Well, I guess there's enough space.
I'm thinking about the back lot. Okay, that was my question.
All right, thank you. Any others?
I have another question. So everybody that's at the drive up needs to go around the building on the east side and partially on the north side to exit. Is that correct?
It's the same exit and entrance.
Yeah, so
So there's one exit, one entrance.
they go around this way, around the building to exit? Yeah, okay. So, and there's how many lanes? 5?
It's like 5. There's a lot of lanes.
Yeah, okay.
There's 4.
Okay.
4 lanes.
I have no more questions.
Okay, thank you. Let's see what I got next on my list here. Mr. Lujan, do you have any questions for the applicant at this time?
Yes, sir. I'm just curious. So on Camino Miramonte, is that the entrance or just the exit for the bank?
That's both.
Both.
That's our
What,
main driveway.
what about on Riverside? Is there an entrance on the Riverside side of the property?
No, we originally proposed that. You may have not been part of that discussion. That was denied by the New Mexico Department of Transportation. The Highway Department would not allow us to have a driveway directly onto Riverside.
Did they say why?
I don't remember what the exact, Richard, maybe you can step in. I'm not sure exactly what the reason was. They're not allowing them anymore. I don't think any new development on Riverside is allowed to have a driveway directly onto Riverside. But I'm not sure what the reason. I don't know if it's causing congestion or problems that they've had in the past. I know that every property along there has them now, including this one, which we're having to close up. So we had assumed that we would get that driveway, but as we were going through the approval process, we were informed that we weren't going to be allowed to have it.
I'd just be curious to know what the reasoning behind it. I work for NMDOT, but in traffic safety. So if I can be of any help to speak with anybody to get more information regarding why they denied it. My main concern is that our neighborhood is basically one huge cul-de-sac, and the amount of traffic coming in and out of the entrance and exit is only on Camino Miramontes. It's going to create a lot of traffic on our neighborhood, and there's a lot of kids that play on our street. So how will the credit union be able to control the amount of flow of traffic on our street? Because there's a lot of small children and families that walk up and down the street. So what can the bank do or the credit union do in order to keep our neighborhood safer from all the increased amount of traffic?
Good question.
I'm gonna have to defer to somebody else on that. I mean, all the traffic is going to go to the east, not to the west. But you know, I understand your concern, and like I say, that's why we originally had a driveway on Riverside. But you know, this is what we're left with. John Wilger, if you're still on,
Yeah.
I know that you had some discussions with someone at NMDOT. Maybe you could weigh in on what the reasoning was.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Wilger,
It's no
let me
worries.
interrupt real quick. We're going to need
Sure.
to swear you in.
Sure.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The proposed driveway is within the 300-foot buffer of the Camino Miramontes intersection. And DOT does not allow new driveways within that 300-foot buffer.
What it comes down to, I know this from my own work experience, is it comes down to their driveway spacing as per their guidelines. They have driveway spacing guidelines that they follow, and it has to meet certain distance criteria for them to allow an additional driveway. And so it appears to me they're following that to the letter. And that's normally the reason why they don't allow for an additional driveway. They may be looking ahead for the adjacent lot that is currently undeveloped with the potential for a driveway to be provided there. So that's my guess. Director Hubler can also address that a little bit when he speaks to that, because I know he's had discussions with DOT about it too.
Well, let me ask you this. The adjacent lot, are you speaking of the land that used to be the old drive-in property that's owned by the Pueblo of Okewinge?
Yes.
Okay, do they own all the land up until it reaches Riverside Drive? Because I know that Garcia Tire they did some work there in order to have additional parking and an entrance and an exit in and out of their parking lot through that property that I believe that the Pueblo owns. And the reason why I know the Pueblo owned it is because I had to ask for permission to have a tree removal service get rid of a huge Chinese elm that was on the property line, and they needed access in order to get to our house through that property. And it's my understanding that the Pueblo is the owner of that property.
San Juan Pueblo.
We'll go ahead and let Director Hubler address that when he presents. If we want to put that in the parking lot for now, we'll circle back to that. But if you have any additional questions for the applicant, Mr. Lujan, we could take those now.
Not at this time. I'm just concerned about the amount of traffic that's going to be flowing in the entrance and exit to the neighborhood. Because of the amount of kids that are in the neighborhood, I don't want to see any. I work in traffic safety, so the type of work I do can at times be very troubling because I deal with fatal crashes in the state of New Mexico, and I would really hate to see any one of our residents in our neighborhood, be affected by something of that nature.
So thank you, Mr. Lujan. So kind of in that term, to phrase your concern in a question to the applicant, do you know how many trips you expect to be generating? I think that's what Mr. Lujan is asking, is how much traffic is expected to be seen on Camino Miramontes based on your traffic study?
Just basing it off of traffic at our branch over on the west side, we would expect that we divide that in half. So I think that the 30 cars an hour may be a little high. I would say more in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 per hour.
Okay.
Obviously, as we come out of the pandemic, that may increase, but we've really been trying to help our members kind of utilize our other channels online and contact center and things like that.
Okay, thank you for that. That was just to kind of give a response to Mr. Lujan and the scale of which they might expect to see, the amount of traffic they might expect to see. So I hope that helps, Mr. Lujan. We'll go ahead and go on to questions from Ms. Bayo.
My only question would be about, but is that not going to be discussed in this section here?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Can you repeat that?
The moving of the mailboxes, or is that not going to be discussed in this section right now?
Oh, I think Director Huber is going to address that in his presentation. So if you want to hold your thoughts on that one.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay. No, I just share the same concerns as the others, as the safety. I've been in this neighborhood for 20 years, and my kids have grown here and still continue to grow, and we have a very growing family, if you will, in this cul-de-sac alone, and it just raises a lot of safety concerns. I'm a nurse in the emergency room, and I too can attest to many traffic accidents that happen when we seem to bottleneck traffic the way that it will be at the end of our road.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Slagle and Mr. Widauer, appreciate it. We'll go ahead and move on. I think I captured everybody on the screen here. So we'll go on to the staff presentation. Director Hubler.
Mr. Chair. So I'll run through. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll run through a number of items here and then comment on a couple of the questions. And apologies, I was noting them, but if I miss any of them, please feel free to ask me again. As indicated before, this is a revisit of a site plan to install a credit union with drive-through branches, or with drive-through lanes rather. This site plan, as Mr. Slagle indicated, has been adjusted. You can see the parking island change shape a little bit. The pathway for the traffic has been expanded to allow for more stacking along the drive-through lanes, and even excluding, if we were to stripe that far south lane as an ATM only lane. Not saying that drivers in this community would follow those directions, but it's worth a shot. Even taking those cars out of the stacking diagram, we still have 30 average vehicles or 31 average vehicles entirely within the drive-through and out of the parking lot, which I think was a major consideration of the last time. So as indicated, that drive has been widened to 22 feet to allow the double stack with a total potential of 45 vehicles, including a long line for the ATM or for folks, bypassing the line, as will likely be the case. The entrance to the street is 45 feet wide. So the question was asked if it allowed entrance and exit. It's designed for one vehicle at a time, but that's a very wide entrance. And that's on purpose to allow for maneuverability, particularly of the ladder truck. We'll see that diagram on the bottom here. This is the updated version. Apologies, the incorrect version was placed in the packet. It showed the old drive-through island, but the applicant did provide an updated version showing that the ladder truck, which is the largest vehicle that the fire department has in kind of the worst case scenario, would be able to adequately respond. There is 20 foot wide, at least 20 foot wide drive lanes as it goes through the entire development. The landscaping was enhanced. It exceeds, just as before, the code minimums. It does include landscaping in the parking island. There is, as discussed prior, a new shade tree by the bus stop. I did have a conversation with Delilah Garcia from NCRTD related to that bus stop. She, based on that conversation, indicated that they're going to petition DOT to put in one of their shelters at that location as well. Right now, it's just a bench. She thought this would be a good time to upgrade that stop. She had no concerns other than just kind of general maintenance concerns. Thankfully, the tree that's going there is a honey locust, which does not produce a lot of leaf detritus. And as indicated, and this is one of our conditions, landscaping is always the responsibility of the developer, the property owner, basically adjacent. So even though the public would benefit from that shade, the landscaping, maintenance, and upkeep would fall to Del Norte. There is, as we discussed prior, a deeper buffer to the west, about 10 feet or so. It's a combination of Austrian pines at the top and bottom, and then a mixture of the mountain mahoganies, red leaf barberries, and yuccas as a shrubbery kind of in front of that block wall. There is, as discussed prior, a 6 foot tall CMU block wall, both along the western boundary and the southern boundary. It was prior along the southern, and the addition between last month and this month was to include it along the west boundary. Looking at the sign plan, this is a request from last time. We did receive the application and the plan for this. Everything is within the expectations and the limitations of the code. We do have a total allowed square footage based on the street frontage of 548 square foot total signage. Their monument sign meets the standards, and then their combination of wall signs meets the standards as well. Those are generally limited to 10% of the facade. And so that is, again, in compliance. And another one of the checklist items from last month. The other one was the lighting diagram, and my apologies, I referenced this in the presentation, but I forgot to list it as an attachment and then forgot to obviously attach it as an attachment. But here's the photometric showing the revised site plan and then the lighting to limit spillage onto the neighboring properties. We already discussed a little bit the new entry. This is a rough estimate. It basically goes, like we said before, from about the fire hydrant across the street to about the mailboxes at their current location. And then noted here is the prior location of the mailbox, and I'll talk about the mailboxes here in just a minute. So kind of running through the review criteria as far as parking and traffic flow, there is adequate parking, including that for the disabled parking or the ADA compliant parking. There is circulation for the ladder truck, and as noted, the entrance was located to the east about 60 feet. The stormwater drainage design does retain the stormwater on site. The original plan was accepted by the city engineer. As we discussed prior, the updated plan was reviewed by their engineer. And then I had a conversation with the city's engineer this afternoon and as well, and got a statement that I'd like to read. She says that upon further review of the development plans, it appears there's a berm intended along the west side of the development. They'll need further clarification of the grading to confirm the estimated runoff. However, with regard to the design detention volume requirements, industry standard is to allow continued historical discharge from the site. That's the roughly 8,000 cubic feet we were talking about before. It would be the owner's responsibility to detain all developed runoff, the other 12,000 or so feet we discussed. Historical runoff can be equated to that runoff generated by the site prior to any site improvements. This is actually a condition of the state engineer that historical runoff be allowed to continue as that's what recharges our aquifers and rivers. She does conclude to say that SMA could work with the city and the development engineer to clarify rates and ensure adequate detention if necessary. So my recommendation there would be, if we do still have concerns as we move through to the action of this item tonight, that we put that on staff and the city engineers to work with the design engineer to verify. As far as utilities go, the city was able to clarify that new taps, meters, and black flow preventer and a hot box are required for the landscaping. New tap is required for the fire hydrant, and that the existing taps will be used for building water and wastewater. I did have a conversation with Jimenez. They confirmed that their existing easements, including that the one that's for the transformer that was discussed prior, as well as that there was adequate service to the site. As far as the landscaping and buffering, there is, as we discussed, substantial landscaping overall. We did add the additional tree for the bus stop per the request at last meeting, as well as that CMU block wall on the west boundary to enhance the buffering. The lighting photometrics do illustrate a minimal spillage to the neighboring properties, and the staff has a standard condition that the lighting as it's installed would comply with the New Mexico Night Sky Protection Acts. And then, of course, the sign plan does indicate compliance with the city code. So we do have a number of recommended conditions of approval. The first being a reworded version of the condition one last time, that the applicant coordinate with the Public Works to install the necessary equipment, that they install the fire hydrant as noted on the plans. The third one also being revised a little bit to say that the construction is verified to the ADA specifications by staff as it happens. There is a condition we're recommending to install a stop sign at the exit to Camino Miramontes. As Chair Martinez indicated, it's not technically required based on the traffic volumes. However, the city feels that would be a good idea and would help to remind folks exiting the branch that there is cross traffic on Camino Miramontes from the neighborhood there. Number 5 was also slightly reworded to complete the repairs and maintain the drainage pipe from the NMDOT on the east boundary. Number 6 is similar to maintain the on-site storm system. 7 to maintain the landscaping, and number 8 to comply with the Night Skies Protection Act. We were able to remove the recommended condition number 9 entirely. So now I'd like to touch on just a couple of the topics. One of them being that drainage on the east. There was discussion at last month's meeting about whether or not we needed an agreement or what that would look like. The city's been engaged with DOT. The development of the property to the south, which has mostly happened in the intervening month to provide that additional parking for Garcia, along with the knowledge the city had as part of this project on that drainage easement, highlighted the fact that that development probably impacted the drainage easement as it flowed across the tribal land to the south. Okayawinga does own that entire strip of undeveloped property from the highway all the way to the river, and in fact, from the highway on the other side all the way over to McCurdy. So we have some meetings set up, the city, the tribe, and DOT to discuss general drainage in that area. I brought it to the attention of an individual at Okayawinga who was not aware of that easement at all. He did confirm that they had given permission to Garcia to do that limited time, limited scope development. So that's going to be an ongoing process that's really between the city, the tribe, and DOT. As it exists for this particular site, that easement is still there. It's currently represented by a buried pipe, which is what we're asking be repaired, and certainly what the applicants indicated they want to do is fix that up so it works and takes the water off their site. And they've already got their own water to deal with. They don't need any from the street. The other issue about the mailboxes, I did have a conversation with the postmaster. He and I talked about the process for relocating the mailboxes. They are located, as was discussed prior, in the city right of way. So that's really a consideration between the city and the postmaster. And in this case, it's actually the branch out of, or the office out of Albuquerque's decision as to whether or not to move them. I did go out and take some photos and take some measurements and sent that to our local postmaster so he could interface with the main office about relocating those perhaps to the old site. It may be that that's possible. It may be that a new site's possible. Certainly, in my understanding, the applicant is in favor of relocating those mailboxes to the west, some distance, in order to make them more convenient for the neighborhood, and also to separate the traffic to those mailboxes, particularly pedestrian traffic, from the vehicle traffic to their site. As was noted prior, the current entrance is basically right up against those mailboxes. So right now, if they stayed where they were, anybody would have to cross that entrance and exit to get to them. So I believe that everybody, for the most part, I've heard a couple conflicting ideas from different neighbors. I spoke to several folks today, and it doesn't look like most of them were able to be on the call, but ultimately, again, that's kind of the decision of the postmaster as far as what they do with those mailboxes. So I believe that the applicant, the city, and the postmaster can work to resolve that in a way that we all believe would be the best solution, which is to relocate them west of the driveway and probably as far west as we can get them towards the neighborhood. As was noted, the applicant is installing sidewalks. So the sidewalks that exist in Camino Miramonte will now continue all the way out to Riverside and actually make the turn and go down Riverside along that portion of their property. So we're seeing some substantial public improvements as far as that goes. And then I'd like to conclude, I guess, by just saying that, last month we generated a list of 8 items for the applicant to consider, things to address, things to research, things to redesign. The staff's feeling is that they checked every single one of those boxes. So we are very happy with the current submittal. We do feel that it meets the requirements and the expectations of the city and those as expressed by the commission. We understand that it may not be the perfect solution for everybody. It certainly is, as Mr. Whitehour indicated, is costing the applicants more money, and it's not, fully satisfying every single concern of the neighbors, but I think the major ones have been addressed, and that's generally about as good as we can get as we're working to mitigate these offsite impacts to the best extent possible with reasonable measures. So that completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Director Hubler. Appreciate that. I'll go ahead and lead it off with a couple questions, and one is just appreciate your offer of working with your engineer and the applicant's engineer to further look at the remedy for stormwater detention on the site given the geotechnical conditions. I'd hate for the commission to put something so specific on it that we're kind of tied to any one thing. I think there could be a multitude of solutions. And so that would be my recommendation. Is that something that you'd be continue willing to do and work with them, Director?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as the city, as was discussed by the neighbors, has been working on that road, and we have some concerns about the idea of overflowing, even controlled overflow to the street. So we'd prefer to explore all potential options with our engineer and their engineer.
Okay. Next question is about the monument sign. Is given that there's signs proposed on the east side and north side of the building, and given that the building is pretty close to the street frontage on Riverside, would necessary a monument sign be necessary?
So that's entirely up to the applicant. The city does not require any kinds of signage. We limit the amount of signage you can put, both by square footage and by particular dimensions. But absolutely, if Del Norte felt they had adequate signage on the building and they wanted to pull that monument sign, they could. We could even, our office is responsible for and has authority for approving sign permits and sign applications. And even if we permit a sign, we don't require it be constructed. We just require that if it is constructed, it meets those, what is permitted. So they could even, get the permit for that sign and decide down the road as they went through the building process, they didn't need it and pull it, and that would be fine with the city.
Okay. So that's just some possible cost savings advice to the applicant, that if that's something you don't necessarily see a need for, that could save you some money of not having to build that. So just a suggestion. On the wall on the southern lot line, is that by code required for any kind of buffering or by code or is other types of fence or screening applicable?
Sure. So the wall on the south side was originally presented by the applicant, and certainly the city has no issue with that proposal. It's not something we would require on the south side. Technically speaking, the native land to the south adjacent to this property would be in the commercial zone. However, it's also native land, so they can kind of do whatever they want to with it. But as a general rule, we require buffering between different uses within the similar zone. So between residential and commercial in the commercial zone. And as indicated at the last meeting, that the more recent and the more intense of those uses is responsible for that cost. But given that it's vacant land next door, there's certainly no requirement that that be a wall. The city would be just as happy with a fence and not even necessarily a required fence if the applicant didn't want it.
Okay. So that's another potential cost saving measure for the applicant. Potentially, I would still suggest and recommend that there would be a wall, on that southern side from the west property corner around that pond, just to provide some assurances there about the drainage capture. But certainly it sounds like fencing or something that's, that can be seen through and is cheaper is a possible solution for them to save on costs. And I bring that up just because that was brought up as a potential issue for providing additional screening on the north side across from Ms. Hicks' property. So if there's some balancing that can be made there, some cost savings on other things that can allow for some landscape hedging on that side, to provide that buffering for the folks on that northern side. That seems like it is a possible solution. So appreciate the applicant's consideration on that.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just make a quick comment, because I didn't discuss that earlier. For that fencing or buffering along the street, the city would absolutely be in favor of that being a landscape buffer. It's definitely not a requirement of the city and not really our preference to require anybody to fence their property off from the road. Certainly any property owner has that opportunity if they choose to. But as far as a kind of a design requirement, it's something that we don't typically do, except in potentially extreme circumstances. I think of one related to lighting that we've done a small wood fence previously, but by and large, that city street that runs along the north side of this property is not something we would require them to fence themselves off from, or wall themselves off from.
But like a landscape, a continuous.
Well,
landscape
absolutely,
hedge.
hedging and all that stuff, we're absolutely in favor of. If it lives, we love it for sure.
All right. Thank you, Director. It's all my questions for now. I'll go ahead and pass the baton to Commissioner Casados. Do you have any questions for staff?
Commissioner, not at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner. How about Commissioner Vihil?
No, sir, I do not.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have one question. At the last meeting, there was a question raised about bonding. Was that anything that we should still consider, or should we not?
Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner. That is something that we explored. A review of our code as would apply to this development does not allow us the capacity to require it. A discussion with the attorneys who are working on a development agreement related to the public infrastructure, including the new entrance and curb cut there, the sidewalk, around the north of the property, the public improvements. We discussed whether or not the stormwater should be part of that. They expressed some serious reservations about doing that. not only from the legal perspective, but just from the practical perspective, as far as the way in which we bond. We give a certain period of time to complete the requirements, and then the bond or the letter of credit is released. And something like a stormwater would be a very long-term, perhaps perpetual, kind of hold that we'd have over them. So we're better off, and they felt that we had, language in our code to require them to maintain it, and we're content with the additional condition that stipulated that they maintain the drainage as well as the landscaping, to make it absolutely clear in the public meeting here that that's the responsibility of Del Norte moving forward. They were comfortable with that. So yeah, no bonding on the stormwater.
Very good. Thank you, Director Hubler. That's the only question I had, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wright, any questions for staff?
Yes, I do. Sorry, I had to unmute. First of all, I appreciate the amendments to condition 1. The draft that we saw in the previous meeting was a little ambiguous, so I appreciate that. So with regards to condition 2, which is striping the fire lane, what I brought up regarding that southernmost drive-through lane that's shown as stacking, is that intended to be marked as fire lane?
The fire lane markings, as the fire department has requested them in the past, are generally like we most recently did on the car wash, behind the parking, where the parking aisle is the drive aisle for the fire truck. So as it comes around, in this case, probably both of those curbs would be marked red for no parking standing in the event of a fire. And then I think that, to your question earlier, the city would be in favor of striping that southern lane as an ATM only, recognizing it might not be 100% effective, but trying to keep that at least for the ATM only users.
So, Mr. Chair, that froze a little bit there, but so I guess that was my question: is how could that be indicated as to discourage essentially stacking in that lane?
Yeah, my suggestion would be to stripe that lane as an ATM only lane. I believe that may actually be what it is at the, or at least a portion of the one at Wells Fargo, because they've got a similar scenario. And we'd be in favor of adding language to indicate an ATM only lane as part of that condition.
So you would recommend that as an addition to condition number 2?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, and then yeah. So regarding and I would have to pull it up here. The turning radius, fire truck turning radius diagram that was provided. That's showing the fire truck coming in, rolling over the handicap parking area, does it not?
Yeah, I'm trying to follow the lines there. So I think that,
and I'm not sure what's indicated by right where your mouse is. What's that square with the little light bulb on top of it?
I believe those are lights.
So that's a light standard?
I believe so, yeah. Let me check another. Yeah, that's a light standard. So yeah, the question that we had for the applicant around the fire truck diagram was to make sure that the radiuses permitted the turns, particularly as they made it around these corners of the islands and as they came in. I'm thinking that, and I might refer to Joe here, I'm thinking that these are just carryover lines that were meant to be snipped off, showing that, the drive, that the turn in from the street or the turnout from the street made it through this entryway.
Yes, if I might break in there, Richard, you're correct. And that's exactly what that is. It's a template and it shows the turning radius, and I can plug those in, but I don't have a standard template that shows it turning to the right and then to the left, or to the left to the right. So that is the whole idea of that is just to show that you can make your way through the driveway and then you would turn again to the left. But so those lines going down through the parking, through the handicap parking are deceiving, and I apologize for that.
Okay, yeah, because it appears that there's room for a truck to enter the parking lot there without having to do what's indicated on that plan.
That's right. You would turn to the left and then you would turn to the right and wind up pretty much where that truck is shown there, either going south or going west.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Chair and Mr. Slegel and Director Hubler. So regarding condition 6 and 7, the responsibility for maintaining on-site stormwater drainage and maintaining landscaping. What exactly does that mean? I mean, you answered Commissioner Martinez's question regarding bonding. That was also a concern of Commissioner Quintana at our last meeting. Obviously, that's not possible. But what sort of, I guess what I'm looking for is, what sort of enforcement power is there for the city on that sort of condition?
The city has general enforcement power around landscaping. It's the responsibility of the developer to, make a landscape plan that meets it and then maintain it. Like I said, we just felt it was worthwhile mentioning, and something that we'd like to do moving forward in all of our cases, because around town, one of the things we run into is landscaping that is not being maintained. And by having it as part of the condition of approval, it just gives us a little bit more enforcement power to say, yeah, aside from not meeting the general code condition, you're also not meeting the conditions of approval that were granted for your development.
Okay. And I guess for condition number 7, to maintain the landscaping, and again, the concerns that I had with the 6-foot wall abutting the detention area on the western side of the property, could we also add that they're responsible for maintaining not only the landscaping but the walls?
Absolutely.
Especially to the western property line?
Absolutely.
And how would that be worded, as fencing or walls, or?
I would be specific to say the CMU block walls, because they're indicated on the site plan.
Okay, so for maintaining the CMU block walls. Thank you. And then again, I understand moving the mailboxes is up to the Postal Service, but the applicant is amenable for deferring those costs, if I understood that correctly.
So my conversations with the applicant, they're going to be building sidewalk all along that northern boundary there. So once we get the determination from the post office as to, if they can be moved and where, if they go back onto the existing pad, and if we have to make any changes there, or if they need to be part of the new concrete pour, the city can work with the applicant in that regard to meet those specs of the postmaster and get that constructed.
So it doesn't appear they're indicated on the site plans. What is the location of the mailboxes in relation to the current ingress and egress?
So let me share the screen again here. So the mailboxes are currently directly east of the proposed entrance, right here, number 26.
Is that what
and-
26 is?
Yeah. And their prior location was right in here. It's not indicated, but it's blocked out. And that may be where they go back to. It may be that the bolt pattern or whatever is not the same. That was why I went out and did the field visit and got that details to send over to the postmaster because he couldn't get behind the fence. So then they'll work on determining, how to relocate those. And like I said, they may go back onto that spot. If they don't, obviously that's going to have to be demoed as part of their sidewalk reconstruction. And we just put them wherever, wherever the postmaster says we can, basically. Oh, I believe we lost you, Commissioner Wright. I see the lips. I hear no sound.
You still with us, Commissioner?
No. I think you're here. Try again. No.
How about turning off your video, Commissioner Wright? Maybe that might help your.
Oh, wait, I think there he is. You're here. We got you.
There you go.
You got it back? So what I was stating is really to my fellow commissioners, I would like to see a condition that if the mailbox is allowed to be moved, that the applicant is responsible for those costs. It's their development that's requiring that they be relocated, and it's actually a public safety issue to have them at their current location as marked on a little box 26. I think that's definitely a public safety issue. So I would like to do that, and I guess it's a question I have for the applicant, but let me get through my other questions. Regarding the sign plan, is the signage proposed, which appears to be on, there's actually signage on 3 elevations of the building, plus a canopy sign, plus a monument sign. Am I reading that correctly, Director?
I'm pulling that one up.
And so, yeah, as we wait for that to get pulled up, does that meet the city sign requirements without a variance?
It did meet. I did a review when the sign plan came through, and it does meet the requirements both for overall for sign types, for overall sign allowances, and then for dimensions of each sign. And it does not require any special exception.
Okay. And then regarding the monument signs location, does that interfere with sight lines at that intersection?
It doesn't look like it would, but that's something we can check in the field as we get to that point, I guess. The requirement is 30 feet back from the kind of the street center there. And we can confirm
from the center line of the street or the edge of curb?
It's the edge of the curb it's the edge of the street as continued to the curb. So basically be 30 feet back kind of from this point here. So it may be, this one I don't have the dimensions on, but it may be close. It may need to be scooted a little bit south. That would be one of the things that we would consider as we did their sign application, as we fully process their sign application. They've given us a plan. They don't yet have a contract or anything set up.
So would a condition of approval be appropriate that the sign meet the, similar to what we had at the last meeting? That the signage plan actually conform to the city requirements without special exception, and
Sure.
also that the monument sign not interfere with sightlines.
Yep, sounds great.
Okay. And then my last one, and maybe I have to defer to Chairman Martinez on this, but I am concerned about the block wall over a water retention area. We talked about the maintenance, but also requiring that a waterproof barrier be installed in that retention pond, or is that part of the design of the retention pond itself? I would assume it's going to percolate.
So,
but I'm concerned that the applicant may have liability issues going down the road if those properties to the west were impacted by leaching.
Certainly. And the to the point that you raised earlier with the engineer, both the city requirements and state requirements are for engineering of any wall that's greater than 4 feet tall. So this wall would have to not only be engineered, but would be permitted and inspected through CID as part of their commercial development, same as all the other construction. So I'm fairly certain that in that regard, that's going to be a requirement for them if this wall is retaining any portion of a potential basin. But that's definitely something that we can keep on top of as we move forward.
Well, yeah, it's not the engineering that I'm concerned about. It's the leaching of moisture having a negative impact on those properties, and Del Norte Credit Union being liable to those property owners based on the decision made by the Planning Commission and allowed by the city.
So Commissioner Wright, what we can do, since you already have a condition to discuss the maintenance of that perimeter wall, you can also add a condition in there to ensure that it is appropriately waterproofed. And that's a typical application to a wall that goes underground in contact with moisture. They do that on foundations as well. So if you want to add that into the mix, I would be fine with that.
Would you recommend that as a separate condition or trying to amend condition 7?
We could try to mix it into condition 7 if that serves it well.
Okay. I may need your help with that. If the commission's in favor of approval of this application. I think, and again, because we've kind of done this backwards, with the applicant presenting first, but I believe it's important that we ask the applicant if these conditions of approval are acceptable. It's a little bit out of order, Mr. Chair. I apologize.
No, I'm in favor of that. That's a good question. Would you want him to address that now?
We can wait till a motion, but we've kind of discussed them, and it's based. Typically, we do this after staff presents these conditions, and we ask that question. But I defer to the chair's preference.
Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and ask the applicant if they're okay with the conditions and the changes as presented so far.
We are.
Thank you, Mr. Woodhour.
Okay, Mr. Chair. I think that covers my questions.
Thank you, Commissioner.
For staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before we go on to questions from the applicant, I just wanted to ask staff if now was an appropriate time to, I understand there's some additional information to include into the record for this case that was presented earlier today. So we want to make sure that we capture that and include that into the record. So if now's an appropriate time, we could.
Yep, absolutely. So a couple items. One was that email that I read a minute ago from Souter Miller. And then shared earlier with the commission was an email from Mr. Walla, which has been discussed, all those details. And then lastly, shared earlier with the commission was a petition to the city. We've got a couple folks that are going to speak to that, and we'll be able to testify kind of the items in there. But that was submitted, and we'll include that in the record as well. And then I would suggest that if anybody has questions on that petition, both Ms. Hicks and Ms. Martinez were involved and are signatories to that, so can kind of address and testify to those specific concerns that might not have already been addressed. A lot of the stuff in the memo or in the petition, I will say, is more to the city's responsibility. It's certainly connected to this development, but it's not directly a result of this development. The condition of the street, for instance, that we've discussed a couple times now. As I mentioned before, the city is working to totally reconstruct that street. We're at a 30% engineering phase, temporarily stuck on, guess what, drainage issues. But we will continue to move forward on that. And that, of course, will happen, regardless of what happens with Del Norte here. And as we move forward, then obviously we'll work the Del Norte development such as it exists at the time into that project. And then some of the other stuff mentioned in the petition, I can certainly respond to if anybody had questions on it. But it's more general, like I said, kind of concerns directed towards the city. I believe we've discussed with the applicant and with my presentation, those items directly related to this particular development.
Okay, thank you. And I felt it was important to go ahead and enter that into the record, make sure it's part of this public hearing. Thank you for that, Director. Commissioner Wright?
So for clarification, Mr. Chair, that petition will be entered into the record?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, we're running a little beyond our imposed 8 o'clock adjournment time, so apologies to City Manager Martinez and his staff for, but we have a lot of important questions to address and things that have come up. So we'll try to move this along as quickly as we can to conclusion. But at this time, to continue on with our process, does the applicant have any questions for staff at this time?
I do not.
I do not.
Thank you. Any questions to staff from the neighboring property owners? I'll go ahead and go around the virtual room again and start with Ms. Hicks and Ms. Martinez.
So this is mostly for the city? Or
yes, questions to Director Hubler.
So the biggest concern is, why is the city not, there has to be some sort of contingency in play to get at least one exit off of Riverside. Mostly for the southbound traffic, because there's going to be a stall of northbound traffic going out of Camino Miramontes. Additionally, obviously the road repairs are a huge concern. The lighting, there's additional traffic that's been coming in and out of here, which increases the risk, like safety risk for the community. So I'm not quite sure. I feel like there should be more of a timeline of when that's going to be addressed versus it's going to happen down the line. I feel like that should be addressed before this credit union even goes up, due to the fact that there's already if you have that increased traffic from Del Norte, and then you have the additional traffic going in and out of the community as well, while there's road construction, that's going to be even more of a nightmare on top of what we're already going to be dealing with this additional traffic, due to the fact that the DOT doesn't let there be an entrance or an exit off of Riverside.
Okay, so I heard a couple questions there. I'll respond to the first one related to the Riverside. As was discussed prior, the applicant's original plan and the city's absolute preference was for access on and off Riverside. That does, as was indicated prior, go to the DOT as it's their jurisdiction. And the applicant did work on an access permit. They had a traffic engineer that our office engaged with. This is something we worked on from July when we first received this application through to December, and that's what caused the first major change in the plan to utilize just the Camino Miramontes component. And to the point that Joe mentioned earlier, or Mr. Slagle mentioned earlier about DOT's absolute failure to allow that. DOT did, in my conversations with them, indicate two things. One of them being the driveway spacing under their SAM manual or their access manual. And then the other one being, honestly, the opportunity for alternative access. This is something that they prefer to do, and definitely in the last number of recent developments have done. Several that have gone up in the past 5 years in this immediate vicinity, including Big Five, including Zia Credit Union, including the one there that was the rebuild with Harbor Freight. All of those were required to utilize their other available access points. In other words, the city streets, the public streets that they were adjacent to. And I'll just quote from the traffic engineer who's responsible with District 5 for reviewing these permits. He said, because of the ability to access the property from Camino Miramontes, ingress egress access at another point on New Mexico 68 would not be an option, despite what may have been done in the past. And that relates to the fact that even though the prior store had that access, because this is a different kind of development, they had to reapply for that access. And DOT has been taking a much stronger line, as Chair Martino said, on kind of sticking to the requirements in the manual and trying to waive those as minimally as possible. So because there is a public street there, albeit a street that does go to a residential neighborhood, the first several hundred feet of that public street are in the commercial zone. As we discussed at last month's meeting, the commercial zone in this area generally extends 500 feet from the middle of Riverside. In this case, it's a little less because of that residential development. But that public street is available to commercial development. Certainly Mr. Archuletta's place on the north side of it uses that. And this place has the right to use it as well. So that is really kind of, unfortunately, not an option that we have any more opportunity to impact. So the applicant, to their credit, has reworked their site plan to satisfy their needs as best as possible and satisfy the needs of the city as best as possible, recognizing that other options might be preferable but aren't available. Regarding the traffic management as we go into the construction phase, and I do want to highlight that that is in process. As I indicated, we're at the 30% design phase. That's been work in progress the last year or two. We got some money from capital outlay for that. Once that design gets complete, then we'll go after money for the construction. That's likely to be a year or two at least into the future, by which point obviously Del Norte should be fully constructed. So we'll have a good idea of how to best manage that traffic. This is something we have to deal with anytime we do road projects, whether it be pothole repair or whether it be the major sewer reconstruction that we're going to be doing, or sewer line extension we're going to be doing along State Road 76 coming up here in the very near future. It's absolutely not ideal. It's obviously also temporary and it's never fun, but we'll all work through it as best we can. And I believe that was both questions, but I missed anything. Ms. Hicks, please let me know.
Yeah, that does. Also, you're saying that they could utilize the first 100 feet, but they're actually going into the residential area 152 feet. So, I mean, the other places, Harbor Freight, Dick's, they utilize the first, several feet of the entrance of those streets. They don't go that far back into the residential area either. So that's also something, I'm not quite sure where the line is of how far they can go. Because like I said, obviously you just said 100 feet, but they're at 152.
Oh, so the commercial district in this area, with the exception of this property, it goes to the west boundary of this property. But in the neighboring properties, it actually goes several hundred feet further. In this area, it's about 500 feet. So 500 feet from the middle of the street. It's a little bit unique in this scenario because when the development was put in for the Camino Miramontes, the property owner at that point owned closer than the 500 feet. And so a portion of that where your house is and your neighbor is immediately adjacent was included in the residential zoning as part of the approval for that subdivision. It was rezoned. But generally speaking, the residential district, certainly north and south of here, is much deeper than it is on this particular site. So they have 500 feet of commercial property fronting along the street, and their entrance is coming in about 152 feet in, like you said.
Okay, so I feel like I'm beating a dead horse with the trying to get Riverside relief. I mean, I also, with the median, I do have a concern because there's probably about enough space for maybe 3 cars off of that median. And if, like, let's say there's 4, that's gonna hold up the traffic all the way back onto the street by up to Walmart. And that might cause issues as well. Is there any plans for that to be extended out?
So one other bit of good news I feel is that the DOT, and again, totally separate from this project, just part of their regular work, we finally got them to focus some money on the city of Espanola. They've done big projects north and south of us the last several years. And so they're currently just beginning what's called a corridor study. And this will evaluate basically every aspect of Riverside all the way through town from the north to the south boundaries. That includes medians, that includes access points, that includes traffic signals, and includes speed. And this is the opportunity at which they would then make whatever changes they felt were appropriate. So the good news here is that, again, because of the timing, that's a several-year process. We'll have some form of Del Norte development, maybe even a completed Del Norte development by the time they get to fully evaluating that particular intersection. So they'll be able to take that into account.
Okay, I think that's pretty much it for me. Do you have anything, Liz? For the city?
Questions?
For the city? No, okay.
Thank you. All right, let's see, Mr. Lujan, do you have any questions for city staff at this time?
Not at this time, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Vello, do you have any questions for city staff? Are you still with us? You there? I see her.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
So, now we got you.
I don't have any questions.
Thank you. All right, so I think that concludes staff's portion. Let me make sure I got everybody covered here. All right, now's the time for the neighboring property owners to make a presentation of their own. So I'll ask if you can, keep it to keep time moving along here. Keep it concise and then we'll allow for cross-examination by the applicant, staff, and the commission as well. So Ms. Hicks and Ms. Martinez, we'll go ahead and start with you again. Do you have anything to present to the commission?
Mostly the concerns that we kind of stated earlier with this being residential and there's safety for children. Most of it was laid out in the petition that we presented to planning and zoning. Obviously the value of homes. So my house actually is the largest house in the neighborhood, so it's valued at the highest. And it's the first house, and with the additional traffic and with the entrance and exit coming in and out of this area, it actually might impact my home value, which is a concern for the entire neighborhood because the home values are determined partially as a residential. There's a uniform residential appraisal report, which impacts, like I said, the entire community as well. So that's also a concern. So something being done with that, making sure that there's obviously a distinction between the residential and the business side, which I feel like Del Norte, we've kind of discussed that already of what it is that can be done, and you know, shrubbery and all of that stuff, like just kind of creating that defined line. There was also road repairs, lack of adequate amount of street lights, and then, you know, I think you addressed also the stop signs, and then the mailboxes, of course. But I don't think you've had resolution on the mailboxes of what you guys are gonna finally do, or did the postmaster still need to talk with the Albuquerque USPS department about that?
Ms. Hicks, I believe was staff's part of their report, and I think that's correct, right?
Yeah. So those are the main concerns. Obviously, the increased traffic, the in and out traffic I think the biggest concern is going northbound towards Taos from Camino Miramontes is going to actually be a lot worse now. It's already strained quite a bit at times. And so I think that the entire community did also agree with that per the petition. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
My main concern is safety. I'm going to play devil's advocate. A customer driving into Camino Miramontes to go to the credit union, when that individual approaches the entrance, sees that all the lanes are pretty loaded and decides not to wait in line, the first thought is to keep going, maybe turn into Alicia's driveway to back onto traffic, or go to the first cul-de-sac where Michelle Vio lives, and you know, her grandchild playing out there, or Mr. Casillas's kids are sometimes out there throwing the football around, or even going to the second cul-de-sac where there are also a household that is raising the grandkids. And in the last cul-de-sac, there are several children at any given time, 6 or 7, that are riding the bikes and running around. So my main concern is safety.
Okay.
Because that happens. I am a customer of the credit union, and with the situation that we're in now with a pandemic, and I've gone to the credit union up on the west side and saw the lines and decided that I didn't want to stand in line. I didn't. So, I mean, I think it's a safety issue. It's a real safety issue. And I just think that the traffic is really going to get bottlenecked at the stop sign to make a left onto Riverside Drive, as well as to make a right. But, you know.
Yeah, the fact that there is no room for variance with the DOT. I mean, I'm surprised that the DOT won't allow an additional exit off of Riverside the way the Del Norte originally wanted it, with the fact that there is a large residential population, and that's our only entrance and exit out of this community. And it's 35 homes, which means, you know, there's several residents multiply that at around 2, and that's how many people come in and out that actually just live here. That's not including people that visit, right? So the fact that the DOT is not allowing that exit and it's a residential area, I feel like that's just unacceptable, in my opinion. At least relieving a bit of the southbound customers, people just exiting going south, would make a huge difference.
And I understand what you relate to us about the same scenario for Big Five and Harbor Freight, that they have ingress and egress out of residential streets. The traffic at those retail operations is not as heavy or consistent as it can be at a credit union with 5 drive-up lanes on a Friday payday, with that number of cars coming into the street.
And those are like some of those streets keep going, and they have other options for going in and out. This one we only have this one entrance and exit off of Camino Miramontes. So that does not, and then they also have the options of either street on either side of them, or which that relieves that traffic as well. When you use this residential as the only one, and I'm not blaming Del Norte at all. I think this is DOT, and I think that they should have been on this call and the previous calls, so they could understand that this is a residential neighborhood and it's not a regular street. It's the only entrance and exit. It's to a dead end.
Thank you, Ms. Hicks and Ms. Martinez. We'll go ahead and continue for the sake of time. I'll ask any commissioners if they have any questions for you or Ms. Martinez. Commissioner Martinez, do you have any?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Casados?
Chair, not at this time.
Thank you. Commissioner Vigil?
No, sir, I do not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Wright?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And I don't have any at this time, but I want to thank you for being here again today and sharing your concerns and comments. And I'd just like to state that DOT are also public officials that you can contact and express your concerns about the situation. So I would say that avenue is available to you as well. So thank you again. We'll go ahead and move on to a presentation from Mr. Lujan. Do you have anything to present, Mr. Lujan?
Not necessarily a presentation, but can you provide us with the information? Since I do work for NMDOT, I have access to the email tree, so I can email the appropriate person to get some input on this matter. I'm in traffic safety, which it's a little bit different of an area, but if you can provide some contact information with who you've spoken with or who you've had contact with NMDOT, I'd like to try to bring some attention to this problem with the traffic in front of our neighborhood.
Okay, I'll tell you just because I do know. That's Javier Martinez, Javier with the J.
Okay.
And Brad Fisher.
Okay.
And they're both with District 5. Javier is the assistant district engineer and Brad's the traffic engineer.
Okay, so you said Javier Martinez?
Yes.
And the other person?
Brad Fisher. And they both work in the District 5 office in Santa Fe.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the second name. I'm sorry.
Brad Fisher.
Okay. I would just like to get a little more clarification as to why they will not allow an exit, at least an exit from the Del Norte property onto Riverside, because I agree with the other residents that having only one way in and one way out is going to create a traffic issue for the neighborhood. At least if there's more than one way out, as people are leaving, going through the drive-through or leaving the property, if they could directly head south on Riverside would help alleviate some of the traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Lujan. Is there any questions from the commission for Mr. Lujan? You could just raise your hand if you do. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands go up, so, oh, Commissioner Wright, go for it.
Sorry, I had to unmute again. It would just be great, as Director Hubler mentioned, corridor studies in the works. I would urge essentially all of you as citizens to participate in that. And as Chairman Martinez indicated, DOT is a public body, and hearing from the public is important to them. So I would encourage you to do whatever you can in that regard to assist the city in these matters. Our hands were really tied here. It was a burden for the applicant, it's a burden for the city, and it ends up being a burden for you as well as property owners that are affected by this. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Earl.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, does staff have any questions for Mr. Lujan?
No questions.
All right, and does the applicant have any questions for Mr. Lujan?
I don't have any questions.
We do not.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Vayo, it's your turn if you want to present anything or make a statement, and then we'll be available to ask questions of you.
Well, my concerns, I've said them before, and we all voiced them in the petition as well, which was presented to you also. I mean, it's no secret, and it's pretty much out there, all of our safety concerns and whatnot. It's just, I just don't understand how there's not another way to approach the DOT if the DOT is the stopping point for having this this entrance and exit onto Riverside. The applicant is a community. A credit union is to involve the community and better the community. It's a local establishment to help the local community. And we in this neighborhood make up a great part of this community. And I, with all due respect, in saying this, I invite the applicant to bring their grandchildren and their children to ride their bikes in our neighborhood on a busy Friday afternoon when this credit union is at the end of our neighborhood, in our community. So, I mean, it's just disappointing that we're not able to take it any further from here because the DOT is making a stop. I mean, I'm not opposed to the credit union at the end of the road. I too am a member of the credit union, but there just needs to be more done. This is our community. And if these establishments are being built to serve and protect our community, then that's what it needs to do. And it needs to take into account and consideration the community that it's building on.
Thank you, Ms. Vayo. Appreciate you being here and expressing your concerns. I'll ask the commission if they have any questions for you. Again, if anyone wants to raise their hand, I'm looking at the screen. Okay, seeing none. Any questions from staff for Ms. Vayo?
No questions.
Thank you, Director. And any questions from the applicant to Ms. Vayo?
No, we do not.
Thank you. Okay. Next is any comments from the general public, but I don't see any. So we'll move on to If the applicant wants to make any final comments, this is your time. You can choose not to if you don't have anything to close with, but you have the opportunity.
We don't have anything additional at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation and everybody for presenting. Appreciate it. So we'll go ahead and close the session for public comments. And I'll ask the commission if they need to take a short break, or do we want to continue to move forward? Everybody okay to continue?
Mr.
Nod
Chair,
or-
I would like a 5-minute break.
Commission okay with a 5-minute break? All right. We'll return at 8:46. So we'll re-adjourn then. Thank you.